sorry about that. We had a bit of an audio issue here. I'm going to pass it over to Josh Murphy to introduce himself. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, I'm Josh. I've been on the board for now a few years. Feels weird saying that. And yeah.
Thank you. And then I see Rob Meyer.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I apologize for not being there in person. I had every intention of coming down, and then a stomach virus and the flu came over our house. So out of an abundance of precaution, I'm staying here in Syracuse for today.
Thanks, Rob. No worries on that. Hope everyone feels better. Then I see Chris Tasato.
Hi, everyone. Chris Tasato, and I'm with the New York State Council on Children and Families.
And I see Jessica James.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jessica James, and this is my second meeting as a advocate, and I'm calling in from Syracuse this afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. Michael?
Alexia, you know I was planning to be there in person, but the weather did not cooperate.
No worries at all. There's not a lot of us here in Albany. And then Dr. Yu?
Hi, my name is Helen Yu, and I'm a researcher here at the New York State Institute for Basic Research. A lot of snow out down here.
And then Kristen Thatcher?
Hi, everybody. It's Kristen Thatcher here. I would have been up there, but we got some big lot of snow in New York City. So, yeah.
Thanks, Kristen. Am I missing anyone that's on online? Nope. Okay. Apologies for the delay here, everyone. We're having some audio issues in the meeting room. The microphones are not picking up. So I'm just going to quickly go over some basic updates. Colleen, can you switch the slide, please? Next one. Yeah, so the New York State executive budget is currently going on. There's budget hearings. Excuse me, this is 1 second. Well, the audio is mirroring back and it's very hard for me to hear. Okay, I am back. Apologies again. Can everyone online hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so some quick updates from the start again. So the executive budget was released about a month ago. The governor proposed her executive budget. Currently, there are budget hearings going on. As we speak, the commissioner of OPWDD, the commissioner of OMH, and the commissioner of OASIS are testifying in front of the Senate and the Assembly, answering a bunch of questions. Just wanted to update the board that there's nothing directly related to the board within the budget. So nothing that would harm or help the board within the budget. So we don't have to be on the lookout for that. And number two, we have some legislation I just wanted to update you on with relevance to the board. As you all know, if you've been on the board for a little bit now, we've been on the path of developing a neurodiversity flag, and we had a whole contest that Josh Mirsky, board member, flag design won, and he's worked with Senator Mannion and Assemblymember Seawright, who are the chairs of disabilities in both houses, to establish a bill that would create the state flag for raising awareness of neurodiversity. It would have this board maintain the flag, so it doesn't tie a specific design to the flag, but it does have this board maintaining and updating it. And that has passed the Senate previously, so Josh is really hopeful that it's going to get through both houses this year and be able to be voted on or be signed by the governor. And then we have A4842A by Assemblymember Simon. It's a pretty big bill, but among other things, it would direct the board to recommend a minimum budget and funding for a holistic autism spectrum disorder treatment center to be housed at SUNY Downstate Medical Center, and then oversee a selection search for the chair of that center. It doesn't have a same as in the Assembly, so I don't think that will be moving in the near future, but I will update the board if it does, because that would give us some, give you some things to take care of in terms of overseeing a search and then recommending a budget. And then I've had a lot of outreach to the board's email address from members of the public asking how they can be appointed to the board. So the board doesn't have any oversight of that directly other than the subcommittees that are not appointments, which I'll talk about right after this. But if you have any interest in being appointed to the board, you could reach out to the governor's office, the Senate Speaker, the Senate Temporary President, which is Andrea Stewart-Cousins, or the Assembly Speaker, Carl Kesey's office. Their offices hold the appointments, so the board and people are appointed within being a self-advocate, a professional in the field, or a family member. Next slide, please. And we are still looking for applications for the self-advocacy subcommittee. Thank you for those of you who have reached out and sent in your information so far. The board's going forward with some interviews. So we're just looking for a statement of interest. If you want to include a resume, you can, but it's not required, and then some contact information. And the email address for the board is asdadvisoryboard@opwdd.ny.gov. And if you also just Google OPWDD Autism Board, the first link that comes up is going to have the full page and also all of this information on it again. So you don't need to write it down this moment. That's just Googling OPWDD Autism Board. Great. And we're going to switch to the next slide, and I'm going to kick it back over to Courtney.
Great. So hopefully everybody can hear me okay. I'm excited that we have a guest presentation today, and in order to introduce our speakers, I am going to turn it over to Kristen Proud, who's the Executive Director of the New York Council on Developmental Disabilities, which was renamed about a year ago or so, formerly the DDPC. And I wanted to disclose that one of the presenters from the New York Alliance is an organization that I work with in my day job. So I just wanted folks to know that, and that to be public and open. So I'm going to turn it over to Kristen Proud.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks very much, Courtney. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Great, thank you. We're having a little connectivity issue in our office today as well. So if you can't hear me at any point, just throw something up in the chat, please. So as Courtney said, I am the new executive director of the newly renamed Council on Developmental Disabilities, previously known as the Developmental Disabilities Planning Council. And the mission of the New York Council, as is the mission of all of the councils in every state and territory in the country, is to enhance the lives of individuals with developmental disabilities and their families. And we do this by providing grant opportunities and doing education and advocacy work that promotes self-advocacy, participation, and inclusion in all facets of community life. So as I said, the council's mission is to really enhance the lives of all New Yorkers with DD and their families, to ensure that they are included in all facets of community life, be that in housing, employment, healthcare, and a whole array of other opportunities. Being part of a community and living as independently as possible are goals that are supported by the council. And we're doing some great grant work in this area. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Jackie Hayes, who is the council's Diversity and Inclusion Program Specialist. Jackie's going to give an overview of 2 grants that the council is involved in that are related to community-based housing opportunities. One in particular that I am very excited about has helped facilitate a housing development out in Riverhead in Suffolk County. And that has given several individuals with developmental disabilities, as well as several veterans with disabilities, the opportunity to live independently in an affordable, inclusive, and really beautiful new housing complex. So Jackie, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Kristen. And I'd also like to say thank you so much for the opportunity to share about our grant projects. We're always so excited to highlight the work of our grantees. And as Kristen mentioned, you know, our council really includes people with developmental disabilities, their families, and caregivers. And, you know, they're so vital to the work that we do because they share with us some of the needs that are happening for them, you know, living in communities and addressing things like housing. So our council members really highlighted for us the need for more information about community-based housing options. They said that they weren't aware of all the options and opportunities that are available that they could take advantage of, and really wanted kind of a one-stop shop, a place that they could find those. They also shared with us that they need help navigating housing to make sure that if they first to find these housing opportunities, community-based housing opportunities, but also that if they lived in the community, that to make sure that it was really financially feasible and sustainable for them to maintain that housing. And they shared with us as well that there was a need to educate others, like landlords and developers and local officials, on creating housing for people with developmental disabilities. So out of the needs that our council members shared with us really grew these 2 grant projects. And we have been really lucky to partner with the New York Alliance on Innovation and Inclusion. They've been such an excellent partner and really are the ones doing the work of the grants. So the first one, as mentioned, was the Regional Housing Collaboratives, and you can see on the slide the years of that grant. That was a 5-year pilot grant that just ended in December 2023, but the Alliance will talk a little bit more about that. And then the second grant, which is just started, is the Housing Resources for Independent Living. So we're really excited about these grants and how they'll really create robust and accessible resources on living independently in the community, specifically geared for people with developmental disabilities, their families, and their caregivers. So I really want to pass it over to Carol and Seth now, and just a little bit about them. Carol Napierski is the Vice President of Program Development and Grant Management at the New York Alliance for Innovation and Inclusion, and Seth Greenman currently works as the Project Director for the Housing Resources for Independent Living. So I will pass it to them, and Carol and Seth, feel free to add anything that I may have missed about your bios, but thank you so much. I can see that Carol's speaking, but I can't hear you, Carol.
Of course. I'm so sorry. I'm so used to Zoom, and I apologize for that. As Jackie said, certainly thank you very much for the invitation to speak today. It's been a great opportunity. I've been with New York Alliance for 9 years, and a lot of my work has been with creation of resources and information, technical support with regards to homes in the community. in addition to weaving in the use of assistive technology as a natural support. So I am so pleased that Seth and I can, gather a little bit of time today to present on, one of the grants that we just finished, and then also as a stepping stone to our current and future work. So how we're going to do it is I'm going to present on the statewide and regional housing collaborative grant that just concluded December of last year. And then Seth will kind of be woven in here and there throughout that grant because he has certainly the subject matter expert. And then he'll be sharing the work of our new grant. So the first thing is the statewide and regional housing collaborative grant. It was originally a 3-year grant, and we had the opportunity of moving forward for 2 additional years. What I'd like to do is just to spend a little bit of time talking about the general deliverables within that grant. First one is the creation of the Master Housing Navigator. In future slides, I'm going to be talking about what a housing navigator is, and then we'll also spend a little bit of time on the role specific to the Master Housing Navigator. Also, one of the things that the Master Housing Navigator had worked on throughout the course of the 5-year grant is a housing pilot that we're going to be talking a little bit about the design and the outcomes of that particular pilot. In addition, we always find that housing is regional. We look at the difference between housing in Buffalo from the capital region to Long Island. So what we find it is so important that we are within the region when we're talking about housing. Certainly there are statewide issues and opportunities, but to be within the region, that's where we really make the housing happen. In addition, we're going to pause for a little bit and I'll talk to you a little bit about the New York Housing Resource Center. It's a standalone website that has a lot of the robust education and also resources with regards to housing. And also, as we have gone for the last 5 years, we've developed numerous resource development and learning opportunities. So I want to pause and share what we have right now on the Regional Housing Collaborative on the New York Housing Resource Center website. And then at the end of our presentation, we would love to hear feedback. What else are we missing? Any questions with regards to housing? So why don't we start? What is housing navigation? Housing navigation came through a Balancing Incentive Program grant. What we wanted to do is really create a position, a role, somebody to help and support throughout the whole process with regards to housing. It's a time-limited, outcome-orientated service. Really looking at it as more as, I think of when we bring in a medical specialty. They come in for a short time, they help out to support, and then they move away. This particular position is obtaining and sustaining housing. It's a really very robust 36-hour class. In fact, we're just starting our winter class right now. And it gives the learning opportunities from developing social capital, looking at the person, looking at their needs, and also their interest in housing. In addition, looking at the financial capital, looking at benefits, income, and bringing that all together and helping a person find a house. The next area is the benefit of housing navigation. It's an individualized housing plan and budget, benefit optimization, and transition. It coordinates the moves. It also helps with any crisis, and it's accountability. The next area I'm going to pivot over to Seth to help out with the housing navigation report.
Sure, yeah. Thank you, Carol. And I think we should be on slide 7 at this point. I'm not sure how. Yep. Okay, great. Thank you. So Carol mentioned, Carol reviewed the role of a housing navigator. So someone who partners with the current circle of support and the support network that the person has in order to develop a housing plan, implement it, and then really support the person to ensure that it's sustainable long term. And so the regional and statewide housing collaborative grant that started in 2019 looked at doing this statewide across all 5 OPWDD regions. So as Carol mentioned, the grant identified a master housing navigator for each of the OPWDD regions. So there were 5 of us. At that time, I was the master housing navigator in OPWDD Region 1, as I'm based in Rochester. So I don't have the snow issues that everybody else has right now, fortunately, for the first time, in a while. But we identified the master housing navigators for each region, and then we asked people who were interested in working with a master housing navigator to develop a housing plan and implement it to apply. Over the course of the housing navigation pilot, we had 29 people that completed their housing goals. So it was very exciting to work with those. Hold on, just pulling up. We had 29 people who completed their housing goals, 28 who chose not to continue, about 11 who were on housing wait lists at the end of the pilot, and then a few more people who needed more time or were really just in the beginning phases. So we had a total of 85 people who enrolled. We worked with these people. We tracked the financial information that both from before they moved to after they moved, and the number of services that they were accessing and the cost of those services. And we also tracked kind of quality of life indicators from before they moved to after. And ultimately over the 3 years, and it got extended into the 4th and 5th year, 29 people completed their housing goals. Through that process, we identified several kind of systemic conclusions regarding housing navigation and regarding the process of supporting someone to move from either certified or a family situation into their own independent living situation. We identified that housing navigation takes time. Even though it is a time-limited service that just works on developing a housing plan and implementing it, in many cases, it did not fit in a nice, quick 3 months or 6 months. In many cases, it was upwards of a year or 2. And so it took time for the housing navigator to work with the person, work with their circle of support in order to develop and implement this plan. There was also a complexity of barriers that we encountered related to a person with intellectual or developmental disabilities, their financial picture, their service life. Really, in many cases, we encountered a lot of institutional bias that still exists within the system's funding mechanisms for many of the housing-related services that support independent living. And so the report obviously goes into much greater detail about some of these conclusions that we identified as we navigated the pilot. Additionally, part of the report, which is very interesting, is as I mentioned, we did track the kind of financial impact of helping people move into an independent living situation. And so out of the 29 who completed their housing goals, we were able to capture sufficient financial data for 24 of them. So we were able to look at their pre-transition monthly housing costs. Basically how much they cost taxpayers ultimately, right? So public services, whether it be OPWDD services or other public benefits. So what is their kind of monthly cost pre-transition and then monthly cost post-transition once they're settled in their own living situation? And what we found was that of those 24, 13 moved from a certified setting into independent living, and 11 moved from a non-certified setting. Primarily, these were they were living with family members prior to their move. And so one of the things that the report highlights is just the cost savings that created. So altogether, those 24 people, 13 moving from certified into independent living, is going to equates to an annual cost savings of almost $700,000 in public benefits and services. Altogether, the 24, it's a little over $500,000. And so just kind of throwing numbers out there. If you don't like numbers, that's fine. Some people do, some people don't. But the reality is that it's a huge cost savings to the taxpayer, to the service system, to help people not only live where they want with who they want, but to increase their quality of life by having that choice. So ultimately, the report recommends that we simplify the process for helping people to navigate independent living and the housing planning process, and that we continue to educate and inform system professionals on how to approach this planning process with or without housing navigation involved.
Wonderful, Seth. Thank you so much. For the part of the report, we looked at the return on the investment both ways. Seth had mentioned about the fiscal return on the investment, moving a person from a certified to a home in the community. We also worked with SUNY at Albany and had a grad student help to develop a pre and post interview and a survey for the person who's making that transition. And certainly the return on the fiscal, we've seen it, and we have it in the report, and the return on the investment from the person's perspective was also extremely positive, that they are able to move out on their own with some modest supports, much like we do in our homes. So it's a really interesting report. And later on, there's a link to where the report is on the New York Housing Resource Center website. Later on, I'll show you where some other resources are. So thanks, Seth. I appreciate that. And the next slide. So we spoke about the master housing navigators. We find that it's so important that we have somebody within the region to be there for technical support. Also, the master housing navigators within those regions, like Seth had mentioned, work with the housing pilot in 3 individuals every year for 3 years, at least 3 individuals. In addition, what we find is very important is to bring together housing stakeholders to make housing happen. And we kind of coined the term, it's probably been used before, but we refer to it as a regional housing collaborative. We bring everyone together on a quarterly basis that can make housing happen. So it's government. So it could be New York State Homes and Community Renewal. It could be OPWDD. We invite government. We invite HUD, USDA to join us around the table. We invite developers, housing consultants, builders, agencies, individuals. We also have county representatives around the table and also city representatives. We recently had one in the Syracuse area, and we had the city planner come join us, gathering all the folks around the table to make housing happen within those regions. And some of the really great takeaways from those meetings are partnerships. We had recently had one in the fall, and I'm going to give you 2 examples of what just happened recently. The one in Long Island, we had our meeting at the Long Island Builders Association. So we had developers, we had the providers, we had individuals, family members, all around the table. At the close of the meeting, what ended up happening was people got together. They introduced themselves to developers. They've introduced themselves to consultants and had those conversations, those rich conversations about their vision for affordable housing within Long Island. Slightly different scenario happened in the capital region. The Adirondack area, way up by the Canadian border, is really a tough area. We could have homes that are 20 miles apart. One of our providers was talking about the issues with lack of affordable housing in that particular area. We had a developer who was part of that regional housing collaborative and asked for their contact information so they can make the connection to see what they can do to make housing happen in that area. And that's what bringing people together, the most impactful way of making housing happen. So we do meet quarterly, and we have a great deal of partnership and development. There's a very short video that we wanted to share with you, and it's from the perspective of a developer. His name is Dave Gallo, and he's going to tell you unscripted from his perspective what regional housing collaboratives does. And I don't know, Jackie, if we're able to queue up that video, or perhaps we'll just send it out later on with the PowerPoint slides.
Yeah, let me check with Alexia. Is that something that you have on your end, or am I able to share?
Yep, we should have it shared now.
Okay, that's great. And it won't take more than 2 minutes, but I do think listening and hearing it from a developer, from his perspective, what a regional housing collaborative does.
We're not getting the audio on that.
Okay. What we'll do, Jackie, is we'll share the whole link to the video because the link is, or the whole video is very powerful. So we refer to this as an impact video, more specific to Long Island. Because of the Master Housing Navigator and because of the regional housing collaboratives, some really positive outcomes happened in Long Island, which is one of the most difficult places to build affordable housing. So one of the things, and Kristen had mentioned it in her opening remarks, is that within Long Island, they work together with a particular county, Suffolk County, and Suffolk County passed a piece of legislation that said any dollars that are county dollars that go towards affordable housing, you need developers to have set asides for people with disabilities and veterans. That means certain number of units in the affordable housing building need to be dedicated for people with disabilities. Pretty cool. And since that piece of legislation, affordable units are now available within Long Island. And most certainly we have a long way to go, but that's just a start.
And
I
just
don't want
really,
to interrupt, but we do have audio available on that video now if we want to replay it.
Let's do it. It's 30 seconds.
Great.
Thank you.
Experts in that space, so being able, I think as a developer, without regional housing collaboratives, we wouldn't be here, right? Because you have to be able to talk to people in the know, talk to people that understand. As a developer, I don't fully understand every population that we serve, but we work with experts in that space. So being able to meet the other non-for-profits in the space, being able to connect with Suffolk County, understand their program. In this particular case, it was the Suffolk County Sewer Infrastructure Program, and it was the dollars there that implemented the 10 units of intellectual disabled housing here in this building.
And we'll most certainly, thank you very much for queuing that up, and we'll share the whole video. The video is like 12 minutes, but it speaks to the journey of what's happening in Long Island. And I wouldn't say a similar scenario, but each of the other regional housing areas also have a story to share. Let's move on to the next slide, please. So early on in BIP, when we were starting to develop all these great resources regarding housing, we looked around and we didn't find a standalone website that could host all the resources that we're developing or we're finding. So we created what we call the New York Housing Resource Center. And it's a standalone website that again, hosts all of our activities. If we have a recorded webinar, any little materials that we develop, any resources such as the Housing Navigator pilot program will be hosted on this site. And if you have any problems finding this particular site, just go onto the New York Alliance website, and all the way on the bottom, there will be a direct link to this particular website. And in the right-hand corner, you will see the opportunity to sign up for our listservs. What we do, we're very fortunate. Developers will mention if they have, a new affordable housing opportunity or if they're starting to rent up a particular area. So we share what we hear about housing in New York. And it could be opportunities, it could be a change in legislation, it could be a change in an ADM that revolves around housing. But we do like to keep our stakeholders invested and up to date on what's happening in New York State with particular for housing. So within the New York Housing Resource Center, we also weave in things that are associated with housing. Person-centeredness, the use of assistive technology as a natural support, Those other resources are also included in there. All of our resources, what we're starting to do is we're not going to create long webinars like 45 minutes to an hour. As we move forward, we're going to kind of chunk it down to a very short topic, maybe 10 to 15 minutes, and Seth will be sharing a little bit of what we've just recently learned. And then we're also going to pair it with written materials, making sure that our written materials are also in plain language. Everything that we host, whether or not it's a community of practice or a webinar, are all recorded, and we post them onto our website so anyone at any time can have access to them. One of the other things that I do want to mention, which I unfortunately went pretty quick through in my opening remarks because knew a coughing fit was coming on, is through our grant that just concluded. Throughout the course of each of the 5 years, we had offered what we called a community of practice. It's an opportunity for stakeholders to come together for a very long series that's really geared towards housing. The first year, actually our first 2 years, the focus was really inviting family members and individuals in to learn more about housing. And we always start with person-centeredness and go through housing types and benefits. Our most recent community of practice, which just concluded in November, the offering was to care managers. Care managers have a different level of responsibility now that a most recent, well, I say most recent, it's about 1.5 years old, housing ADM came through. They are really looked at as being the focus or the support with regards to housing. So we had offered a community practice for our care managers. That went extremely well. And each time we host a community practice, we create what we call a landing page. So members of that community of practice would have all the resources available to them on a secured web page. Would you mind going on to the next? Okay, I'm going to cue this up, but then I'm going to pass it on to Seth. Earlier on, when we started to work with individuals in the housing pilot, what we found is that there were not really interactive materials and supports for a person who is moving out. What their rights are as a homeowner or as somebody who's renting, and what their responsibilities are. So we created, and Seth was really one of the project directors on this, created a very interactive guidebook on the rights and responsibilities. So I want to kind of pivot over to Seth to share a little bit about the design of this resource.
Thank you, Carol. The goal in the development of this project was to bring together the resources that already exist across multiple platforms and bring them together into one space so that people can access information on their rights when living independently, as well as their responsibilities in a variety of situations. And so this guidebook brings together a collection of links to resources ranging from information on reasonable accommodations and modifications to lease agreements and understanding the terms of your lease. It includes resources on how to budget and pay for your bills when living independently, as well as resources on home ownership, because we found many people had questions regarding their rights and responsibilities when thinking about living and owning their own place. These resources come together in a variety of modules that are contained in the guidebook and can be accessed online. It's all web-based. It can also be downloaded as a PDF if you prefer to have that accessibility on your device. We also, through this project, conducted a series of interviews. We called it the Living in Your Own Place series. And we worked closely with the Self-Advocacy Association of New York State in order to interview people who are already living independently regarding their experience in some of these topic areas. And so that video series is available as part of the guidebook as well.
Thanks, Seth. And we can move on to the next slide. We have numerous housing-related resources on the New York Housing Resource Center, but I just also want to call out this one in particular. This is called our Housing Resource Guide. And over the last several years, it's been updated. And this most recently was updated in 2023. And the table of contents goes with the natural flow of our progression for housing. So the first area would be person-centeredness. So learning more about what is person-centered, and then gets into all of the other aspects of housing. This particular area, we of course spent some time recording little webinars on each of these particular topics. The difference between a certified setting and a non-certified, which is a home in the community, is one of the modules, the types of housing, and it gets into, even as we move forward in our own housing journey, sustainability, and then, you know, certainly moving, and then sustainability. Very interactive, lots of materials, and it's best with this particular resource is just taking one module at a time. And if, again, you're interested in really hearing more about each of the modules and the visual part of it, we do have companion webinars for each of those particular topics. So all of our resources, and we just kind of highlighted maybe 3, would be on the left-hand side of our landing page for the New York Housing Resource Center. And then just, you'll see it on the blue tab on the left-hand side. So I'm going to kind of pivot over to the next grant. So this is our grant that was just concluded. It's certainly more than just a stepping stone for our continued work in housing. Talked a lot about the New York Housing Resource Center. The website is fantastic, but it really is what we consider to be more bi-directional. We put materials on, and it doesn't necessarily have that interactive, that ability to navigate. So we were extremely fortunate. We had applied for a CDD grant, which Seth will be sharing, the grant itself, and also our vision for more interactive and more navigation with our site. So thank you for the time, and I'm going to ask you to move on to the next slide, and then I'm going to pivot over to Seth, who is going to talk about our Housing Resources for Independent Living grant.
Thank you, Carol. Next slide, please. As Carol mentioned, the Housing Resources for Independent Living grant kicked off in January of 2023 with the primary goal of this grant to develop or redesign the New York Housing Resource Center website in order to create a website that's not only comprehensive as far as the resources that it offers to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families and their caregivers related to non-certified housing, but also to create an experience that's more interactive, that's focused on the user being able to navigate to the information that they need, no matter where they are in their housing journey. So the past 10 years or so of developing so many resources and posting them to the current New York Housing Resource Center website, kind of as positive as that was, it kind of produced the challenge of how do people find what they're looking for on the website? With so much information and so many resources, sometimes it was hard to navigate and find an answer to the specific question that you had. And so really it's kind of the starting point for this new grant, is how do we create something that's much more interactive, focused on the user and helping them to navigate and accessing the information they need in a way that is that supports them to be successful in their housing journey. Next slide, please. So as we kicked off this grant a year ago, one of the first steps we had to take was to catalog all of the resources that were currently available through the New York Housing Resource Center as well as the New York Alliance. And so we spent several months cataloging and bringing together these resources and organizing them on a centralized list by topic and subtopic, as well as audience and modality. So being able to create this list that then we can look at and understand, what is it that we have in total? Where are the gaps? Where is information missing, or where does information need to be developed differently for people to access it in a way that's meaningful for them? So we spent several months cataloging this list and then began to review it with a variety of stakeholders, including the master housing navigators and our advisory group, in order to begin to look at that catalog of resources. So you can imagine nearly 300 resources is quite a lot. It takes a lot to organize, and also highlights the potential challenge as people are navigating the New York Housing Resource Center. How do we get to the information that we're looking for? So from there, really our goal was to get direct feedback from people who use these resources on their experience with them. So we took that catalog and we developed 10 resource pages around each topic area. So we had topics ranging from housing options to renting resources, homeownership resources, support services related to non-certified housing, home ownership, public benefits and entitlements. And so we created 10 different the resource topic areas. Technology was another one as well. So we created these resource pages and developed them. And then we began outreach to both people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, as well as parents and caregivers, in order to invite people to participate in a review of these resources in one of our focus groups. So next slide, please. Over the summer of 2023, from about May to September, we began to host focus groups. So we collaborated with the Self-Advocacy Association of New York State in order to host 10 focus groups specifically with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities who are either living independently or are interested in living independently, in order to review the different resources and provide feedback. We also worked to do outreach to parents and caregivers through a variety of means. So we worked within the current network of providers and agencies that the New York Alliance is connected with and supports, as well as we partnered with the School Age Family and Community Engagement Centers, which are centers for school age educational supports under the New York State OSE partnership. And so we worked with them in order to get information out as well, to invite people to participate in the focus groups. And we ended up hosting 17 focus groups with parents and caregivers, in addition to the 10 that were in collaboration with SANY. So it was a very intense time of meeting with people, but an excellent time to really connect and invite people to look at the resources and give feedback to us in 2 key areas. So we wanted to know what's missing. I think Carol mentioned this. Where are the gaps? So as people are looking at these different resource topics, what questions do they still have that aren't being answered by the resources that they're looking at? And then also hearing from people regarding the barriers that they encounter when trying to access or utilize web-based resources, right? So the reality is that if we have all this information out there, but it's not accessible or easy to use, then that's an issue as well. So each focus group was paired with a specific resource list, and they got to review those resources ahead of time and then come to the focus group and have some discussion around their experience looking at that information. Next slide, please. Over the course of the 4 months in which we conducted the focus groups, it was just an awesome time of being able to connect and hear feedback from people who were in all different walks of life as far as their experience with non-certified housing and independent living. Some were really far down the journey and have been living on their own for a long time and were able to reflect on the resources from that perspective and give feedback to us on whether or not the resources are something they thought would have been helpful to them through their journey. In many cases, people were thankful for the information because they didn't even know it existed, and had been, working through the process of living independently for years without having access to some of the resources that we had shared. Others are just considering the journey, and we're very glad to know that there's a resource they can go to and begin to learn about the process. So we got feedback from participants that, some people said it was the best focus group that ever participated in, which was quite flattering. Ultimately, because of the number of focus groups we had, we were able to keep the size of each focus group rather small, and that really helped to promote discussion. So people didn't necessarily fade into the background. Everybody got to have a chance to voice their opinion and their thoughts and have some dialogue even amongst themselves. We had several focus groups that people ended up swapping contact information afterwards because they want to stay in touch and support one another. So it was very exciting to be able to connect that way statewide. So some key takeaways from the feedback that we gathered during the focus group. So we heard from many people that effective translation options are essential as we move forward with the new site. So being able to allow people to access the information in their first language and be able to translate materials was really important. And we got a lot of feedback around what that should look like, from effective captioning of videos to transcripts posted of videos so that people can directly translate the video content on their own. So some exciting feedback that way. We had a lot of discussion around accessibility and features that must be included and must be at the forefront of development. So that was actually very helpful and guided what we're going to talk about in a second as far as our RFP process to web developers. Really highlighted a focus on accessibility and some of those features that we want to see included. We also heard from a lot of people feedback regarding our presentation of resources. So many of the resources, specifically webinars or video recordings that are on the New York Housing Resource Center, they were developed in many cases during COVID, an hour-long Zoom session, right? And so they're hour-long webinars that many people found hard to access or hard to use. If your time is limited and you're looking for specific information, then an hour-long webinar might not be the best route to get information from. So we heard from a lot of people regarding how we could shift a focus from lengthy educational webinars to shorter impact videos, as well as looking at options to timestamp and provide table of contents for our webinars. So that's something we're going to be working on as well. Additionally, we obviously heard from people that it's important that the website is compatible with a variety of mobile devices to make sure it's accessible no matter who's using it and what device they're accessing it from. And then we took a lot of feedback from people on gaps that they identified in the resources, questions that they were asking about a specific topic area that they did not find the answer to. So that's been really helpful, even as we've moved into 2024 as far as developing our work plan for this year. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that after the focus groups, our next step at the end of last year was really to enter the RFP process and develop an RFP, or a request for proposal, from website developers based upon the feedback we received from focus group participants. So really people, the feedback that they provided us regarding accessibility, translation, formatting, really drove the development of our RFP and the request that we put out. So initially, the RFP was launched in November. We had a very small number of web developers that we reached out to at that time. And unfortunately, we did not receive any responses. And so we went back to our advisory group early January to say, okay, here's what happened. We didn't get any responses from the initial RFP. And so we were able to brainstorm a lot with our advisory group. We removed a few things from the RFP that we thought might be cost prohibitive. And we broadened our scope of web developers through the connections that many of our advisory group members had. And we resent out that RFP early January. As of this point, we're still in the process of waiting for proposals to be submitted to us, but we did have 4 web developers submit questions regarding the RFP that we posted answers to last week. And then we have had 1 web developer already submit a proposal in order to be considered for redesigning the new website. So I think we're on the right track at this point. It's very exciting. It also highlights the importance of having a group of people that you can ask questions of, right? My expertise is not in web development. Carol's isn't either. And so really being able to connect with our advisory group and get feedback from them was really helpful, as well as other professionals that we reached out to. We connected with someone at the University of Virginia, others here in New York State, and really got a lot of feedback to help us redesign that RFP and do some outreach to web developers. Next slide, please. So last slide for this, and then we can, I think, open it up for questions. But as we look forward for 2024, obviously one of our priority goals for this year with this grant is the redesign and development of the new website. So we're really hoping to identify a web developer and kick that off in March. We'll then be holding bi-weekly meetings with that web developer, and as we work through the design phase, and then later this year, hoping to reach back out to all of the people who participated in the focus groups, as well as outreach to others who might be interested in order to test the website. So to be able to get kind of that sneak peek, look at it, see how it's working, see if it meets all of the requests that our different focus group participants had. Finally, by the end of the year, we do hope to launch that. And kind of in addition to that website development process, we also are beginning to pursue a plan for resource development based upon the feedback we received from people in our focus group. So the different gaps that they identified, we've put them together in a plan for this year, and we're working with a team to begin development in those different areas. Certainly from the focus groups, there were several priority topic areas that got highlighted for us as topics that need additional content, or where maybe the resources need to be modified a bit in order to be more accessible for people to access. So some of those include shared living, home ownership, self-direction, and housing, specifically non-certified housing, looking at the OPWDD housing subsidy and transition stipends. Technology was one of them. So a whole bunch of different topic areas where we have outlined specific tasks that we took away from the focus groups that we're going to be working on this year. What's exciting about that is, in our goal is, as we develop those resources in these priority topic areas, we're going to reach back out to the people who participated in our focus groups and others to advertise education around these topic areas. So we're not just going to wait for the new website. We're going to provide education on these priority areas throughout the year. So if that's something you're interested in, we certainly, Carol had mentioned our Housing Connect newsletter, and I think we can talk about that quick at the end as well. But please sign up for that, because we'll do a lot of advertising regarding this education series through that route. Next slide, please. Okay.
Thank you, Seth. That was wonderful. One thing I also wanted to mention was really important to us is we work with a team. So it's just not Seth and I. We bring in subject matter experts to help us to develop resources. So what we did was we paused, and what we wanted to do is to create the ideal way of presenting on a webinar. So we did some research and found that webinars should not exceed like 12 minutes, one particular topic. You should be talking about that one topic on 3 occasions at least, so a person will remember it. We all have different ways of learning. And then at the end, if you could share a story to reinforce the topic. We are asking that all of our subject matter experts follow this. So we have a very cohesive way of presenting our materials. And like Seth had said, we will be posting them onto our new website. In addition, we also want to host the opportunity of having a discussion in person, as much as we are in person through Zoom, but more of that interactive. So it's just not one way of learning about these materials. So Seth, we do have one question so far in the chat, and I thought I would start and then I'm going to kick it off to you. So the question is, can you please discuss any housing projects in New York City? Not necessarily specific on the affordable housing projects. Certainly we can look at a couple different areas. OPWDD funds every year what they call ISH projects. So we can certainly look at affordable housing that is being developed through OPWDD money, or through New York State Homes and Community Renewal. As we move forward, and we certainly have different types of resources on our site already that can help you to maybe find housing in New York City. I know it's very hard in some areas, but there is a program within New York City called the Housing Ambassadors. It is volunteers that help people to kind of navigate housing. What we also found is there's a group that we have been working with for the focus groups, and since then we've actually presented to their members. It's a group called Synergia, and they do also help with supporting housing or your independent living center. So what we can offer is just vehicles, avenues to find affordable housing in New York City. Moving forward, one of our team members who will be certainly onboarding within the next month is in New York City and is what I consider to be a housing subject matter expert. So we'll be asking them to also, look at other resources that are specific to that particular area in New York City. New York City is a little bit different than the rest of our state. They have, like governments within the city for housing and also supports. So we're really wanting to make sure that we bring in a subject matter expert for housing in New York City. So let me pass it on to Seth to fill in any of the gaps.
No gaps. Carol covered it, but just just to kind of go back to the focus groups. One of the areas of feedback we did receive and that we took note of was that for all of the resources we had on the New York Housing Resource Center website, there were gaps in education specific to New York City, which even surprised us, because we do so much work with colleagues in New York City and have education developed specific to New York City housing, but just to realize that, yeah, we were missing some things. And so, as Carol mentioned, we're bringing someone on to help us with that, but we've identified some different areas that we're going to develop resources on: renting in New York City, home ownership, how to find affordable housing and navigate Housing Connect and other routes. And so we're going to be doing some work that way. Yeah, so that's certainly something that will be part of our education series this year.
So Seth and
thank you for that.
Carol, it's Courtney. I know you can't, I don't know if you can see us in the room here. We do have some questions in the room, but before I turn it over to somebody who is interested in asking a question, I first wanted to thank you for a really great presentation and very thorough in all the areas where you've been doing work. And of course, I thank the Council on Developmental Disabilities for funding this work, because I think it's been really important to create these resources that are available to everyone now. But as we're considering our role as the Autism Spectrum Advisory Board, I'm most interested in the first two things that you presented on, which were the Master Housing Navigator Program and the 5-year pilot, because those have tangible outcomes for people. And the fact that you had 28 people who achieved their goals is really exciting. And we would love to get your recommendations on how do we take programs like the Housing Navigator, Master Housing Navigator Program, and the pilot that was so successful, and scale them statewide. So love to get your input. And then I was going to turn it over to Chris Soriano in the room here, who has an additional question.
Sure. Let me start a little bit with the Master Housing Navigators and the Regional Housing Collaborators, because I think both of them working in concert really move forward the housing agenda. Unfortunately, both of those were part of our previous grant that finished up last year, December of 2023. We are looking for additional funding for that. In addition, we have the Housing Navigators. There's a little over 400 who have gone through the class, and my guess is out of the 400, we probably have about 75 or 80 who are active, meaning that they are helping individuals on a pretty regular basis with their housing journey. There are 3 modest ways that housing navigation can be reimbursed currently, and we are speaking with OPWDD on a fairly regular basis, because I think it is their interest, and certainly ours, that housing navigation could be accessible to all. Again, just a not necessarily an ongoing support service, but as needed, as a person is ready to move on to a new part of their housing journey.
I would note, I don't, you were saying that there may be ways to have the service reimbursed. I do believe that housing navigation is a new covered service in the state's 1115 waiver. So for those individuals who have intellectual and developmental disabilities and qualify for services under level 2 of that waiver, housing navigation is one of those. So I think that's a new area of opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And CMS in 2015 said to state Medicaid directors, housing navigation, I think they use it as housing transitional services, is an allowable service. So we always look to our federal government for guidance, and they're saying to us that it is. So our hope is to move it into either a state plan amendment or the 1915 waiver. But you're absolutely right, Courtney. It was just introduced into the 1115 waiver a couple weeks ago.
Yes, great.
Yeah.
All right, Chris has a question.
Yep. Thank you, Courtney. Carol and Seth, thanks for the presentation. I thought it was great. Seth, I want to just direct a question back to you because you mentioned the Office of Special Education Educational Partnership, which is a network of support that my office funds and provides that service and resources to the field. I'm curious in how you made the connections for the focus groups, because that's music to my ears as far as that's what we want to be happening out there in the field. One major function of the OSC Educational Partnership is to build those connections and be supportive. So just curious how you guys crossed paths and made that happen so we can continue to make that happen.
Yeah. I'm on mute. Okay. Yeah, it's a great question. So I have a great connection in my area with the resource specialist with the Midwest School and School Age Family and Community Engagement Center, School Age Faith Center, Laura Hurwitz. And so her and I had connected previously on a variety of different things. And so even as we entered this project and we're planning for it pre-2023, we were thinking that would be a great way in order to do outreach to the school age population and ensure we're getting perspectives from parents and caregivers of school age children, even as they're looking at transition planning. We know that housing, unfortunately, does not often get talked about in depth when students are navigating the transition planning process. And one of our goals for this New York redesign of the New York Housing Resource Center is that it could be a resource that transition specialists and coordinators use and provide to families and access when students are transition planning. So Laura and I connected. She's actually on our advisory group and sits on that to help us out with that process. And so through her, we were able to connect and present to the different teams that support the school age and early childhood family and community engagement center statewide. And then we just put information out to them that they could distribute to their networks. And so that's been the extent of the partnership so far, but still it's been excellent to kind of cross the silo out of OPWDD and get into NYSID and the OSC partnership and have some relationship that way and share some of this information. So we're excited that that can continue, even as Laura continues as part of our advisory board and as we're doing some of the user testing and then education later this year.
Thanks, Seth. And let's make sure that we can, any resources you have that we can just cross connect between our websites so we can link those together. That'd be great. And just another comment, just the importance of the housing topic. And we know on the educational side, statewide, as we look at our statewide continuum of services and the availability of programming for students with disabilities, and we are seeing students with autism, that they are aging out of their programs, their residential programs, and still remaining in those residential facilities because there just isn't quite yet the programming available on the adult side to accommodate their needs. And housing, I'm sure, is a major component of that. So this is just a topic that we have to continue to work on and talk about. So again, thanks for the presentation.
Are there any other questions from other members of the Autism Spectrum Advisory?
board. This has been incredibly informative, I think, to help what we might consider as part of our recommendations in the next version of the report. Oh, Kristen, it looks like there's a hand raised. Did you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, my stupid thing, my stinky phone was being mean, so excuse me. So about, I love the presentation. It's not a question, it's more of a comment. So there is the Catholic Church Arch Care has now opened up independent living for people with autism. So, and that's where I'm living right now. And I could tell you, it's a really good experience and everything else like that. So maybe you should talk to Arch Care too and see if you guys work together too, because this is a great opportunity for other people with autism to get housing. That's all I have to say.
That's great, Kristen. It's particularly important, I think, to hear from people about their individual experiences. So we will hopefully connect with Arch Care, and the Alliance now knows that's a resource if they haven't already connected with them.
Yeah, thank you, Kristen. I heard about the program.
Also, just tell them you know Kristen Thatcher, and that'll help you out too. Just saying.
Great, thank you.
Well, I think you are welcome to stay, Carol and Seth. We were going to see if there were any other additional comments from members of the advisory board, because we wanted to have a discussion to make sure that we're capturing anything else that we might want to recommend on housing topics in general. I don't know if there's anybody else who has thoughts or comments.
Courtney, I'm going to stay on because I'd love to hear the discussion. I think that helps us move forward with our grant work. Thank you for that offer.
Yeah, I think, you know,
Audio for the conference room cut out for us on the remote.
Okay, sorry. No, I was saying, Carol, to the advisory board members, we have a report that we previously developed with recommendations around housing, and we had a subcommittee that specifically focused on housing. But I do think that there's a lot of opportunity right now in, I would call them less supervised, more independent and supportive housing options. And I think OPWDD in particular has been trying to figure out how to navigate that. They had issued a proposal, I'm trying to remember, it was last year. They've been sort of holding on that based on the large number of comments they received. And I think if we could recommend the expansion of some of the programs that you outlined today within our report, that would be important input to the agency as it relates to individuals who are supported by OPWDD. And I think, Chris, your comments on making the connection with SED resources is a really important one. I don't know if there's any other thoughts. Kristen, I appreciate what you said about your experience with Arch Care. Any other thoughts from members of the advisory board? Well, you should feel free to always get in touch with myself or Alexia if you do have additional thoughts for the report. I think this was really helpful, this presentation today, very timely for us as we're thinking through this issue. And I know Charles at Massimo, who's a member, I don't think he could join us today, but he's probably going to have some thoughts. He's always been a big advocate around housing options. So if there's no other items from the board, I think we're ready to move into public comment. Okay. All right, well, thank you again for joining us. We're going to move into the public comment period of the agenda.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, we do have someone in person here today, so.
I'm just a person in the community, and I asked for the appropriate individual to contact and the contact information regarding this housing program, their email or And if it's a pilot program, and what are the criteria for it? Is it temporary? And that's all I need, contact to apply for the program. I don't know what the criteria is to apply for the program.
Okay.
That's it pretty much.
Yeah, once I run back to my laptop, I'll get you that contact information and have it all written down so you can reach out and then make sure our team also reaches out to you internally.
Great. All right. Do we have any other public comments from folks online?
If you're online, you can click the raise hand button. Once you raise your hand, we'll see you in the attendee section and we will send a request to unmute. Once you accept that request, you'll be able to speak, and we'll accept in the order that the hands are raised. So you need to open participants.
Two people.
Arvana, excuse me if I'm pronouncing that wrong. You've been sent a request to unmute. Looks like you're unmuted. You can make your public comment.
No, I just got a quick question. Is ADHD can consider under OPWDD?
So this board is autism spectrum disorders specifically. So it wouldn't be applicable to this board. And then in terms of the Office for People with Developmental Disabilities, I believe ADHD would fall under the Office for Mental Health, so OMH.
Oh, okay, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Beverly. You should be getting a request to unmute.
Case planner, and I'm working with families that have autism and doing the best that I can to support them through the eligibility process. I've been on the website. I just want to know, is there anywhere directly that could either point me to on the website to get resources? And I also want to host like a community event. So I'm looking for resources, maybe some outreach. And does OPWDD dispatch people to do presentations?
So this is Alexia Holden. So I just want to clarify again, this board is not OPWDD directly or isn't attached to the agency. My role, I just have that with the board. But if you want to put your email name in the chat, I'll send you an email and we can talk offline and see if I can connect you with folks that you need to talk to.
All right, thank you. And thank you for the housing presentation. That was helpful.
Thanks. Thanks, Beverly.
Actually, can I just talk with the first person?
And I just want to clarify to the first question by Arvana. You can also contact the Office of Special Education at SED, the State Education Department, for ADHD and any concerns or issues you're having there. Okay. Next up, Jacqueline, you're going to get sent a request to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Good afternoon. Thank you very much. I'm so sorry. Due to the inclement weather, I was having bad internet. So I apologize. I missed the whole beginning of the presentation. One, is there any possibility you could please share the housing presentation? I am registered with them, or is this being recorded and you can share with us?
Yep, so the recording of this video will be on YouTube within a week. It should be within a couple days, if not faster. And then I'll speak to the folks who gave the presentation to see if they're comfortable with uploading the slides onto the webpage. And if they are, then it'll be linked at the bottom of the Autism Board's webpage. So if you just Google OPWDD Autism Board, it should be the first link that pops up, then you'll scroll to the bottom.
Okay, great. I have two more questions, if you please. I know that, thank you for opening it up to us and giving us these opportunity to, this is such such an important topic. I do have an adult. I have a 22-year-old, very low on the spectrum autism, so housing is a big, and so housing navigation in line with self-direction. You said it's a new, we just had a new waiver. Can you elaborate a little more? Can you give me a little more information on that? How they kind of intertwine with each other, or is it completely separate? Do you mind sharing?
Sure, this is Courtney. And yes, it's a waiver under the state Medicaid program, and it covers a lot of new services, and one of them is housing navigation specifically.
Once again, I think you mentioned 11. I apologize, I didn't write it correctly.
Yeah, well, yeah, it doesn't matter. It's called an 1115 research and demonstration waiver. But there are individuals who, if they meet certain criteria and have an intellectual and developmental disability, they may be able to qualify for enhanced services under that new waiver. And one of them is one of the services is housing navigation, but they have to meet that criteria for that specific waiver.
Housing navigation on the self-direction, or just housing navigation approved for OPWDD?
Housing navigation, I think in the most general sense of the term, it's not well defined at this point in time, so.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'll look into it further because I'm a broker and this is, it helps to serve our, serve children and families of children with special needs. And the last one that I want to mention, you said you're working with developers. Maybe I missed it. Are you reaching out to certain developers? Because I'm also part of a committee in my neighborhood of Riceboro, and I would love to share anything I need to share with them, and bringing up this topic that there is a high need.
Well, the presenters, I can't speak for them, but I know when they presented, they talked about the regional housing collaboratives, which involves several different people from the community, whether it's builders, whether it's county representatives, whether it's families, and they indicated that the regional housing collaborative was a really good resource for that type of thing. Sounds like you probably should get connected to your regional housing collaborative.
Okay, great. Definitely. I definitely would. Once again, like I said, it's on a personal level as well. Thank you very much for having this presentation. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. So next up, Geraldine D'Agostino. You should be getting a request to unmute. Again, apologies if I'm saying anyone's name wrong.
Who lives in Harlem. He's 4 and he's going to be leaving preschool and going into, the regular school system. My daughter's having a lot of trouble in general getting services in Harlem. She's tried multiple agencies for respite workers and home health aides. She works from home, and when he is there, it's very difficult for her to do her job, which is putting them at risk, for income issues. But also his preschool is way down on West 56th Street, while he lives up at West 124th Street. So it's definitely an issue. And when she's asking for help through the Board of Education, they're referring her because, they can't meet his needs, saying that she should sue the Department of Education. And it's a very long process and it's difficult, but that's not the only service that she's missing. She can't get adaptive equipment for AFOs, behavioral intervention specialists. It's really become a big problem. I can say with Housing Connect, she did use Housing Connect to get her present apartment, which is beautiful. It worked well for her, but in general, just the lack of services in Harlem is really difficult for her to navigate. And unfortunately, then my grandson suffers because he can't meet his potential. And we have found the services that he has received have been very helpful. But for augmentative communication device, we had to buy that for him. And we bought the software to download on the tablet, and that's been helpful. But we have to put that money out, and there's no telling when that comes back.
Yeah, thank you for your comment. I can't directly speak back to that, but I'm happy to connect you offline with certain folks. If you want to put your contact in the private chat, we'll reach out.
Could you just clarify, are there concerns with the provision of programs and services? Was it your daughter's child?
Yes, it's my daughter's son. He's 4.
In that case, you could reach out directly to my office, the Office of Special Education. And can we give her the contact? We'll get you the contact information, and we have staff that would be able to assist you with any questions and/or working with you or your daughter and the Department of Education to resolve that.
Thank you.
Okay. Mike Sweeney, you'll be next. You should be getting a request to unmute.
I have a 26-year-old autistic son, and just one statement, one question. The Arch Care Project, I was on the Parents Committee on Staten Island, and they are attempting to do a second project in Westchester. There's been some pushback from OPWDD on the integration numbers, but they are attempting to do it. Number two, I heard at one point, I had to step out of the room, so maybe I missed it, that there was a project in Riverhead and Long Island combining veterans with the developmentally disabled. Is there a website or something that I could look at additionally?
Thank you. Board member Steve Katz, I think you were trying to raise your hand. I think you're able to unmute yourself if you were trying to speak.
Hello. Okay, so I just going back to the affordable housing, I actually have some experience. I'm in affordable housing. I did all the application process myself without the help of OPWDD or any agency. And I can tell you it takes a lot of time and energy and follow-up skills that most people on the spectrum do not have. Basically, every time I saw one ad, I started off, this was long enough ago that I was looking in newspapers, but then I did wind up on the Housing Connect website as well. So if I see one ad for an affordable housing program, I would contact that particular real estate developer and ask them for a full list of all of their affordable housing that they, all of their apartments, all of their auctions, and they'll give you a full list, and then you can apply to all of them. Even Housing Connect doesn't have all of them. Some of them, there's probably a delay of a week or two or a month even. So if you can get in, it takes a long time. It takes years. And that's through Housing Connect and, the 80/20 program. This is not specifically for people with developmental disabilities. This is for anybody. I don't know if that program has people who have those follow-up skills, and the time, because it takes a lot of time and a lot of writing letters and requests and filling out reams of paper.
Thanks, Steve. So I think everyone who has their hand raised has already commented. Is there anyone else? Okay, well, I just want to thank the guest presenters one more time for their time today and the great and valuable information they shared with everyone. If you have any questions for the board or any follow-up, you can send us an email at asdadvisoryboard@opwdd.ny.gov. And then my name is Alexia Holden, and I help out the board from OPWDD, and I'm happy to answer any offline questions if you want to reach out to me directly. That's alexia.l.holden@opwdd.ny.gov. If you just Google Autism Board OPWDD, all that information will be on that first page that comes up on your Google search. So thank you again to the New York Alliance and CDD for coming to present today. Carol and Seth, really appreciate it. Thank you everyone for the public comment and great engagement. Hope to see everyone in person in May, and good luck with those who got snow yesterday.
Thank you. Have a nice day, everyone.
Yep. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.